Hi all, this is Maria Clark at Sweet Willow Designs and welcome to my studio. I am so excited about this project. I absolutely love it and I hope you enjoy it as well. It is this beautiful butterfly in this colorful frame. So let's go ahead and get started. The first thing that we're going to do is get our paint supplies together. Now I am using the DecoArt Americana acrylics. And I'm just choosing a variety of colors that I like and kind of getting them organized and set up. So I'll be using these colors. I'll have all of the colors linked in the description below, so be sure to click on that Show More button and you'll see all of the colors that I've got going here. This is just such a fun array of colors. I really am going to enjoy it and I think you're going to like the combination as well. I'm also going to use these DecoArt metallics, some Dazzling metallics and some multi-surface. And I'll be using the DecoArt chalkboard paint that I just put in this little squeeze bottle because I use so much of it. I'll also use my regular dotting tools. And because I'm going to be doing sort of a mixed media effect on this, I'm going to need some kind of sponge for the stenciling. So here's a cosmetic sponge. I just get these from the Dollar Tree. And what I do is pick off a little bit of it so that it's not got these sharp square edges. But you can see that I've got some other tools here that I'll talk about. You could use just a little sponge here and cut a piece off. Again, I would take the sharp edges off because you get those in the painting. And then there are these little cosmetic sponges. You can get these anywhere. These are from the Dollar Tree and they're round, which is nice. And so those make a nice dauber, a nice stenciler. And then there are this type, which are these little daubers, these little foam daubers that you can get almost anywhere, and I'm going to use that in the video today. So lots of choices on how to get started. You'll need a paper plate, or this is a foam plate, something like that, so you can daub your paint on. I'm using an 8x10 canvas that I've prepped with the chalkboard paint. The thing I want to tell you about the black canvas on this, be sure you've got 2 or 3 really great coats of paint because you want that black to be so rich and deep and dark. So get your canvas prepped. And then I'm introducing 2 new stencils. It's actually a butterfly stencil in 2 sizes, actually, I should say it like that. This is for an 8x10 canvas, and then this is for a 9x12 canvas. So you can see there's a 2-inch differential between those 2 sizes. So check out my Etsy shop if you're interested in those. But that's what I'm going to be using for the project today. I will find the center of my canvas. I always do that to get started. And then I'm going to go ahead and put the 8x10 stencil on here. Now I am going to tape it down. I'm just taping it to my workbench. You could tape the stencil to the canvas if you wanted. I'm just taping it down to my workbench and I'll get that taped down, a little stability there, and then I'll also hold the stencil as I'm going through. So here's that little dauber. I put just a teeny little bit of paint and you'll notice that I am actually tapping that paint off. I want, for any of you that have done stenciling like this, you know that you do not want a wet sponge. You want to have it fairly dry. That's why I tap off quite a bit of that paint. And then I have less chance of leaking around the outside of the stencil. And this has got some fairly fine lines, so you do want to make sure you're tapping off that paint. And so I'm starting with this is a color called Amethyst, and I'm starting on the outside edge, and I'll work my way into the center. Now you may need several coats. I actually put 2 coats of the paint on this to get the coverage that I wanted, but you can stop anywhere you want. If you want it to be kind of a light mottled kind of coverage so you can see a little of the black showing through, that's great. You can stop whenever you like, but I did put a couple coats as I wanted fairly good coverage. Now I'm going excuse me, in with a color called Ice Blue. And I'm just overlapping. I didn't clean this sponge off or anything. I'm using the same sponge and I'll just keep using that sponge as I go, and then get the ice blue on. And then this is a multi-surface green, and this is called green, and it's so pretty. And I'll do that in the center through the body of the butterfly and then also up on the antenna, and just kind of blend those colors in. I did clean the the sponge off to put that green on, just so you know. And here I am, I'm just adding the next layer of color and then just blending out so I have sort of a gradient look for those colors. And I just think that is so, so pretty. This stencil is a little bit bigger than the one that you'll receive. You'll actually receive an 8x10 size. Okay, so there it is. I've taken it off. Isn't that gorgeous? There's a little bit of sheen from that metallic, and it gives such a nice background. Now, you don't have to use metallics. Of course, you could use any kind of paint that you have that you like, the colors for the background that you like. I'm going to leave the lines black. I think I wanted to see how that was going to look, but you could do any number of things. You could dot those lines. You could use a marker, a paint marker, and fill them in. Any of those would look really, really nice, I think. Now, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to clean up any places where the lines are not as crisp as I want. There's just a few. I don't have a lot. I'll use some of the background paint and a really fine brush. And I will go in and clean up those edges. I think this is a 10-0 brush that I have. And you can see that there's just a few little places here that I want to tidy up a little bit and just kind of erase those. And they just disappear. And I've got nice crisp lines. So I only had to do a few little spots. That's why you want your sponge to be really pretty dry. You don't want a lot of glob of paint on there, or you're going to get a lot of overspill on those lines. A lot of bleeding of the paint if it's very wet or thick. A couple little places here. I just love that background. Oh, it's gorgeous. All right. Let's keep kind of refining that a bit and get those lines nice and crisp. Okay, now I'm going to take off my center marks because I feel like I have everything nice and crisp and clean. And I'm just using a damp Q-tip to erase that center mark that I put on. And just lightly. And if you take a little bit of the paint off with that, you can go ahead and just use your fine paintbrush to fill that in. But that's looking good. Okay, let's go ahead and start dotting. I've got a little bit of paint in my tray here. I'm going to be using the Sour Apple. And again, I'll have all the colors listed below. Now, one thing I want to mention is you'll see when I dot this, I'm going to drop slightly down below the curve of that part of the wing. And I'm using my P16 11.5 millimeter, P16 11.5, and get that first dot. And then using a medium-sized nail dotter, I will dot all around. So I'll put my north, south, east, west, and then just fill in the spaces that I have. And this particular design element will be a common theme as we do the main parts of the wing. Great. Now I'm going to my K10.5, 6.5 millimeter, and Vivid Violet is the color there, and same thing, dot all the way around. And then I'm using my I9 5.5 millimeter and bright orange and a smaller nail dotter so I can get the dots around and dot all the way around. Already those colors are popping, aren't they? I just love them. Okay. Now I'm back to my P16 11.5 millimeter. And I'm using the Vivid Violet again. And I will dot all the way around. And I'm going in with my H8 5 millimeter and a color called Bluegrass, and I absolutely love this color. It's awesome. And it matches with it's just a great contrast to the background colors that we put down. and dot all the way around that. And I've done the same thing on the other side, so I just repeat that pattern. And now I'm going to do these little sort of these little waves at the bottom. I used the I9 5.5 millimeter in the Bluegrass to put the first larger dot, and then I used the H8 5 millimeter to get smaller. And then really this is just a matter of, I kind of call this doodling a little bit, because now I'm just going to start filling in the space where I think it needs it. So I'm using a nail dotter and just adding, dropping some dots. I change out the size of the tool when it gets smaller. And I don't do this on every single section of the wing, but it's really nice to add these little fill-in details. It really puts a lot of depth into the design. But you can see there that I'm just filling it in. And again, I'm just doodling, and I'm just kind of going, as I fill this in, I am just adding dots where I think I need to. So again, for this particular wave, I started off with my K 10.5, 6.5 millimeter, and this is the Vivid Violet. And then I changed down the size of the tools to get progressively smaller. So I used the I9 5.5 millimeter and put a few of those in. And then my G6 4 millimeter when I get smaller, and then a nail dotter to finish out that little wave there. I like that detail of the wave at the tips of the wing. That's really pretty. Now I'm using my G6 4 millimeter and the bright orange, and I'm just filling that in, and when I need to, I'll change down to a nail dotter to fill in the rest of that space. What are you thinking about leaving the lines black? I really liked the way it looked. I did try, as I was kind of trying out different ideas, I did try dotting the lines, and I thought that was nice. It might be a little too much, so you just decide, what you think. I also tried a marker, and I did like that, but in the end, I thought the contrast of that rich black showing through the wings and giving us the detail of the design was really pretty, so I decided to stick with that. All right. Okay, now I'm using a color called Sapphire, and I use my K 10.5 6.5 millimeter, and then to go down in size, I used my I9 5.5, and then my G6 4 millimeter, and then again finishing it out with a nail dotter and a really small nail dotter to kind of do a little bit in those corners. Now as we move towards the body, I'm still using the Sapphire blue and my G6 4 millimeter for the large dot, and then a nail dotter to add some of the additional details. When I need to change up in size, I just select a tool that seems to fit in the space without encroaching on the black lines. All right, I flipped my canvas around, and as you know, and I'm sure you do, I flip my canvas around a lot as I need to, just to make it easier for me not to get my hands in the paint. And also for this one, I let there are dry points within this process so I don't get my hands in the paint. On the tips of those wings, I'm using the L11 8 millimeter and the Vivid Violet, and then down to my K 10.5 6.5 millimeter for the change in size, G6 4 millimeter. And really, you're just kind of filling in those sections however you think would be really pretty. There's lots of options for how to fill it in. You could just do a whole series of different size, the random dot pattern. If you know what I'm referring to there, you could try something like that. I think that would actually be very, very pretty. So lots of options. And then I'm going in with that Bluegrass. Isn't that pretty, the way it contrasts with that Vivid Violet? Oh my gosh. That might be one of my new favorite colors. I have noticed that I use often the same colors. If there's turquoise in it or this purple, I just love that. I'm going to try to expand my horizons a little bit and try out some different colors. So we'll see what I come up with on that. I tend to default to the same sort of color palette. And that's just because I love it. Okay, we'll fill in a little bit and then a little arch there. All right, let's see what else we want to do here. Kind of noodling this over. All right, bright orange and the K 10.5, 6.5. And then a nail dotter to just fill in some of that space. Same thing on the other side. All right, let's see what's next. I did let that dry. That was that little break there. I just went ahead and let that dry so that it was easier for me to get these next series of dots down without disturbing the paint. So I do recommend that you do that. All right, now I'm going in with my P16 11.5 millimeter, and I'm putting a contrasting color. This is actually a color called Ocean Blue. All right, I started with my P16 11 millimeter, and then to my K 10.5 6.5 millimeter, and then on to my H8 5 millimeter, G6 4 millimeter, and then finish that off with a nail dotter. And then I used my G6 4 millimeter to place the dots on, I'm still with the blue series here, the dots on either side of that large dot. And then I'm just filling in. And then I did a little arch at the top. That's why I've left a little bit of space at the top of these sections of the wing so I could go in and put a little bit of contrast color there. I thought that might be really nice. And I'm just doodling, just filling in space by going around some of those dots with a really fine nail dotter. All right, and now I'm going to go up to the tip of, right underneath the very tip of these petals. And I am using my, ceramic pencil to draw a reference line for myself so that I know how to slant those, these lines of dots that I'm going to put down. I find that really helps to add these reference lines when you need to. And I definitely need them to keep me somewhat straight. So I'm using the bright orange, and that was my G6 4 millimeter, and then a large nail dotter to dot down. And then I'm just going to kind of repeat dropping these lines down, changing out the size of the tool as I need to. And we'll do the same thing on the other side. So I use the L11 8 millimeter for the large dot, and then I use the I9 5.5 millimeter, and then my G6 4 millimeter and a nail dotter. And then I will do a similar thing in going around these dots. It's not exactly the same. You can see there I did a little variation. I don't want them all to be exactly the same. And then I'll do it on the other side. Okay, now I am going to fill in this one little section here. And I'll be using my G6 4mm and the Vivid Violet. Just bring that line up a little bit to curve around and fill in a little space at the bottom. Now I'm using the Bluegrass and my K10.5 6.5mm and then the H8 5mm and the G6 4mm to put that gradient line down, and then I will use the nail daughter to finish that. Okay, I'm moving into this next section, and for that large dot I'm actually using the ocean blue, and I cut that out for some reason, but I used the P16 11mm for the large dot, and then the L11 8mm, and the I9 5.5, and then a nail daughter in for the rest of that. Do you like these colors? I think they look really great together. Okay, now I'm coming in with the Sour Apple and my K 10.5 6.5mm, and then the H8 5mm, and then G6 4mm, and a nail daughter to walk those dots into the center there, towards the body. I'm going to put a little arch at the top. And I'll fill in a little bit of that space, that open space. And do as much as or as little as you like of this, filling in. If you like it more open and you want to see more of the background, then just leave it like that and you'll be able to see that shimmery background behind it. I think that's really pretty too. I'll fill in the top of this one with that's the G6 4mm and the ocean blue, and then I'll just carry some dots around. Don't forget to wipe your tools so that you don't get that buildup of paint on your nail daughters or on any of your tools. A little more on the arch there to fill in some of that space. And I'll put a little arch on this one. All right, I've let that section dry so I could come back and not worry about disturbing the paint, and I'll start filling in some of the other sections. I'm using my I9 5.5 and the Vivid Violet, and then my G6 4mm on either side, and my nail daughter to bring it in close to the body. And then I'll do a little bit at the tip here. Okay, I've got this last little section here, so I'm using my G6 4mm and the Sour Apple. And the thing about these colors, you could just place these colors wherever you want. I'm kind of trying to balance where I have the color, so I don't want one color to be too much on the top or too much on the bottom. I kind of want to spread them out so there's a little bit of balance. So when you're looking at how you place your color, kind of keep that in mind, that you don't have, unless that's a look that you're going for, which I think is, perfectly fine. I think that would look gorgeous. I just, in this particular one, since I'm using so many colors, I'm trying to distribute the colors around the butterfly to get the best effect. And that finishes up the main dotting. I think I'm going to fill in a little bit more on some of these so they're not quite so sparse. So I'm using my G6 4mm and I'll fill in a little bit of space. Again, I'm using the same color. That's the ocean blue. You can see that little subtle difference between the sapphire and the ocean. The sapphire blue is a little bit got a purple undertone. And then I'll just use my nail dotter to doodle some dots there. Get into some of these really small spaces here with a fine nail dotter. And I'll add a little bit more on this part of the wing. All right, let's start our top dotting. All of that's dried, of course. There's a little transition there where I've dried it, let it dry really well. And now I'm just going in and top dotting. So this is kind of your preference here. I am putting contrasting colors on top of contrast, so that there's a lot of contrast. So there's vivid violet on top of the blue and that type of thing. And you can do as much or as little as you like. And you can introduce a whole new set of colors if you want. I am going to introduce one more color towards the end here, but you can add more colors, or you can use the same colors. For the most part, I'm going to use the same colors as my top dot, but when I go in with my third layer, I'm going to add one more color that I thought might look really nice there. So just go ahead and top dot to your heart's content. Put as much as little as you like to highlight certain areas, give some contrast, give some depth, give some excitement in the color choices, whatever your artistic sense drives you to. I think that's pretty much have to follow what you think is going to look really beautiful for your painting. So I just kind of mold this over and see what colors I want to add next. I think that in this particular piece, it really starts to come alive when you add the top dots. I think, to my eye, that's looking really, really pretty to see that vivid violet on top of that blue come into place. I think that's really looking nice. I'm just really excited the way this one turned out. I think just the deepness of the black was just so pretty with this one. Okay, and we'll just keep adding as many top dots as you feel like you want to. You'll notice that I do correct some of the dots when I don't like the way they lay on top of the one below. So that's why you want your paint to be really, really dry, so you're able to do that without, flattening the paint. Sometimes if it isn't fully cured, you can flatten them, flatten the previous dots, and so I like to let it dry really well. Now I'm going in with that bluegrass on top of that vivid violet. That's a nice contrast. And then some of the vivid violet on top of the orange. It's a little harder to see in the video, but that's also really pretty look. Put a little bluegrass on these brilliant purple dots to highlight the top part of the wing. And some of that bluegrass on that vivid violet towards the bottom and that on that little wave at the bottom of the wing. Really brightens that up. And then I'll put in a few more dots here to punch that up a little bit. And it kind of mirrors what I did on the top part of the wing. Vivid violet on top of that bluegrass at the bottom, the very bottom tip. And some of the vivid violet on the bluegrass. Yep, now what to do? I'm putting the some of the bluegrass on the sour apple there. And that kind of tones, that sour apple's really bright, and so that tones it down just a little bit. Okay, I'm going to drop a little bit of the vivid violet on this orange. And some vivid violet on the orange and the wave here. And also on this little section. Okay, now I wasn't entirely sure what I was going to do about the body. I didn't think I would put any dots on it at first, but in the end I thought it just looked a little too plain against all of the other dotting that I had put on here. So I'm using some of that bluegrass color, which is a perfect complement to that green metallic, and I'm just going to do a little bit of dotting around the body, and I'm just using a small nail dotter to, you know, walk some dots around. I'm not going to do a whole lot to it. I didn't want to get it too, I didn't want the body to be too busy. Okay, and then I put a larger dot at the head and 3 little dots as a crown. And you can see a close-up of that dotting. And then I put a little dot at the very tip of each one of the antenna, and that looks really pretty. So that concludes the initial phase of top dotting, and I let all of that dry really well. Here's the third layer, and you'll notice that what I've done is I've added saffron yellow actually to many of the dots that are on here, and that just gave it a really, that was just my last color that I wanted to add, and I thought that really looked pretty. So you can see where I added the yellow. And it's all dry, and here's our completed piece. There are 3 coats of the matte Duraclear varnish. It's all been dried, and it looks just gorgeous. That's why I really want you to put a rich, deep black on the back because it really pops. It's just so pretty. I love it. Now I'm going to frame it, and I wanted to show this to you because I think that's a nice sort of the end, you know, of the actual finished project. And I am going to put this for sale in my Etsy shop because I think someone's really going to love this one. So I got a blue frame that I have, and it kind of complements the colors in the painting. Now, one thing you could do if you wanted to change the color, just get one of these frames, sand it up a little bit so that it's a little rough, and use a multi-surface paint on there, and you could change the color to anything you wanted. You know, use some of the colors that you used in the painting. I thought this one was a nice complement though, so I really wanted to use this particular frame. So I'm just putting it in, and we'll close that up. Make sure your hanger's in the right spot. I often get that one wrong. And I'm really excited about this one. I'm going to sign it down at the bottom before I put it out in my shop. And then I'll give you a little look at what it will look like when it's framed. Keep in mind the monitors, you know, are all different, so the colors are maybe slightly different. But here's a little close-up of the dotting, and then here it is with my signature. And I think that looks really pretty. I hope you loved this project. It was so much fun to do. The stencils are so much fun, and there's so much possibility for what you can do with them. And so I hope you'll check those out. I've got all the links and everything. I'd love it if you'd subscribe, give me a thumbs up, leave me a comment if you enjoyed the video. Thanks so much for joining me in my studio today. Take care.